Now let's get serious. Let's talk about Office 365 DSC. As the name suggests, Office 365 DSC is a desired state configuration module to allow you to configure and monitor Office 365. So what does it have to offer? This is my marketing slide right there. But basically, the first one is fairly obvious. It's to manage your tenants configuration as code. We saw an example earlier of an SPO site object where I was defining my site collection as code. So this is the first one. The second one is because we have something inside of Office 365 DSC that is called reverse DSC that is baked in. So the moment you install the module, you have access to all the goodies that are included in reverse DSC. That allows you to extract full fidelity configuration out of any existing tenant. You basically run the tool, you say I want to extract the configuration from tenant A, and it's going to give you a DSC script at the end that you can use and that represents the full configuration of your tenant. We're going to see some examples of that, but you can also do granular extraction. So you can pick and choose and say, you know what, I'm only interested in the security and compliance data loss prevention rules, so just extract that piece. Very powerful stuff. The next one is to be able to synchronize multiple tenants together. Right? So if I'm able to extract from one tenant, there's nothing preventing me from taking that extract and applying it to another tenant. Right? Real example is I have some customers that have multiple tenants, and they want to use one of those tenants as their golden image, if you want. So they're defining all their security and compliance rules and policies on that one tenant, and what they're doing is they're extracting the configuration from it and replicating across all the other tenants, just the security and compliance layer, and they're putting everything as apply monitor. The owners of the other tenants can go and modify whatever they want, with the exception of this security and compliance layer. And if they change something, well, the team that's responsible for that golden image gets notified, saying, Bob changed setting A at 11:15 today. And then they're in charge of picking up the phone, calling Bob and asking, why did you touch that? Right? So it's being more reactive than proactive in this case, but it's something you can do. Keep multiple tenants in sync. Another thing you can do that's not on this slide here is you can assess an environment against any template. So for example, let's say we are currently in the end of March 2020. There's a big virus crisis hitting us all right now, and a lot of folks are looking at activating Teams to allow for remote work. Well, if you have a vetted template somewhere, so you have a configuration that you know work with some of your clients, right, that just defines basic settings for Teams, and you want to check, you know what, I don't want to apply it to this other tenant here. I just want to check, is this tenant already compliant with this template? What you can do is you can actually assess a remote tenant against a vetted good configuration, if you want. Again, you're going to hear me say this a lot, very powerful stuff. And then it's going to give you, at the end, a report saying that tenant doesn't comply with this template here because setting A for, let's say, Teams meeting policy, A doesn't meet the required settings. And you can drill down and figure out exactly what settings don't match. The next one is monitoring and getting alerts on configuration drift. So if there's a drift that's happening, you can actually have continuous tasks monitoring your environment. And the moment there's a drift, you can get an email about it saying something changed in your tenants. Currently, we support all the workloads that are listed there. We support Exchange Online, OneDrive for Business, SharePoint, Teams, including everything that has to do with Skype for Business under the cover, security and compliance, Power Apps. We are working on getting Yammer support, Power Automate, so some of the flow stuff, as well as Stream. And we are working on a parallel initiative as well called Azure AD DSC. So if you're interested in helping out with this initiative, I strongly suggest you do a web search for the GitHub repo under the Microsoft organization for Azure AD DSC and get involved. There's not a lot of action right now going on, but it is something we have on our radar and are fully committed to work on. The way it works under the cover is it calls into all the known APIs, right? What I mean by this is, for example, if your title right now is Office 365 Admin, which is probably one of the most generic title ever, you need so many different sub-modules to be able to manage all the workloads that it's almost impossible to keep up sometimes, right? So for example, if you want to go and manage SharePoint, well, you can get the SharePoint Online Management Shell or the the PNP, so the Patterns and Practices module. If you want to manage Teams, you need the Skype for Business API, you need the Microsoft Teams PowerShell module. For Power Apps, you need the Power Apps and Min PowerShell module. For everything that has to do with Exchange, you need the Exchange Online Management Shell. So there are so many different pieces. With Office 365 DSC, when you install it, it automatically installs all those dependencies, all the dependencies, and then you can write just one configuration file to touch all the different workloads. And under the cover, Office 365 DSC knows to what dependency to route the calls. Okay? So it makes it very easy for you to abstract all those submodules. So it's really a layer of abstraction where you write in the same configuration, you can have a configuration block or a resource block that will configure SharePoint site collections, like we saw previously, and then right under you go and create a security and compliance data loss prevention policy. So you can mix and match, right? Because we support everything else under the cover. The tool, Office 365 DSC, is completely open source. You can find it on GitHub, and it's available to you for free. All the documentation is in the wiki, as well as on the official website, which we're going to talk about right after this. We have a team of worldwide dedicated engineers from across the globe. We have folks in Germany, we have folks in Australia, we have folks in the States, we have folks in the Netherlands. I'm in Canada myself with some of my colleagues as well, helping out. But we are looking for help. We're looking for people to test some stuff. We're looking for feedback. We're looking for new ideas. We're looking for contributors. That's the beauty of having it open source and as part of the community, right? So we want to make sure that if you're interested in helping out, but you don't know where to start, feel free to reach out to me. Find me on Twitter. Send me a message. We'll be more than happy to take time to get you folks started. The official website. One thing that we're working on right now is to make an official repository of templates. Remember I was telling you previously that you can assess any tenant against vetted, known good configuration. Those are the templates I'm referring to. So that is going to be where all those templates are going to be hosted once we start working on those. And everything that has to do with how to get started information is on the website. So the website is office365dsc.com. If you go there, there's a section called, so this is basically the landing page, is the marketing slide I just showed you. If you go to getting started, you will have information about everything there. How to install the module, how to write your first configuration, how to extract configuration, how to assess a tenant. So everything is in there. Okay, so make sure you visit that website. Back to our slides. The other thing we do support as well is telemetry. By default, we do collect some telemetry to help us improve the tool. Right? The only information we collect is what resources have been drifting, what resources have been used the most. Right? So for example, if you're deploying a configuration that manages all your security and compliance layer, and we start realizing that, you know what, like worldwide, the SCDLP policy, so the data loss prevention policy resource, is the one that has the most drift. Right? So it might actually raise a flag. Maybe it's not because people are changing something in the environment. Maybe there's a bug. Let's say there might be a bug underneath, right, in either one of the dependencies or in the resource itself. So that allows us to go and be proactive and fix some of the issues there, and just know like how people are using the tool. The beauty about the telemetry engine is that you can, as an organization, plug the tool to your own telemetry App Insight account. Right? So if you don't want to submit telemetry back to us, that's perfectly fine. Right? You can point it to your own App Insight account and start collecting telemetry for your own tenant. So how important would it be for you to be able to figure out, all right, so we're using Office 365 across the board, DSC across the board to manage our tenants. We want to know where the drifts are. You point it to your App Insight account and you're going to start collecting that information just like I am doing right now. And just to show you what we're collecting here. So for example, in the past 24 hours, we've had the property bag is the resource that's been used the most, probably because of the sheer number of entries that there are in any tenant. We've had, let's just have a look here, 8 extractions. SPO site group is one that is drifting a lot. And to be honest, just to follow up on what I was saying here, we had a bug. in our resource. SPO side group, when certain conditions were met, it was detecting a drift when really there were no drift at all. So that's why it's coming up so high. So in the next release, we've actually fixed that bug. So again, being proactive. Back to our slides. Somehow it went back a couple slides, so let's just fast forward this real quick. Now, the other thing as well that we're doing is we allow for advanced logging, which is something that unfortunately is lacking out of the box with DSC. You remember the example I was showing you previously where I created 2 users, I deleted one, and then I ran test DSC configuration detail? It only told me that Bob was not in the desired state. But it didn't tell me much information other than that. Like, what was the issue with Bob? Was it because Bob didn't exist and it should have existed? Was it because the username for Bob was modified compared to what the desired state should have been, right? So we don't have that granular level of detail as to what the drift is. With Office 365 DSC, and we're going to show you an example later on, by default, when you have the tool installed, it creates a new Office 365 DSC log journal in the event viewer, and it captures all that detailed information. If you look at this slide here, what we have is that we know that there was a drift detected on the SharePoint Online sharing settings. And if you look at the actual details, it says, all right, let me just highlight this for you folks. Basically, what we're seeing is, you see this here? The reason why it's not in the desired state is because the property require accepting account matched invite account was currently set to false, but the desired state said it should have been set to true. So you can get that level of information. You know exactly what setting is not in the desired state. Authentication. Now I'm going to be extremely transparent. This is still a bit of a roadblock for a certain customer. We support MFA for the extraction. Fully supported. So when you do the extraction, you're going to get your MFA challenge. You fill up, you successfully do the challenge, and then it starts the extraction. No problem there. The challenge is when you go and apply the configuration or do the consistency check with an MFA-enabled account. Now, think about it for a second, though. Let's say you're deploying your configuration. So you run the tool, you do start DSC configuration. The first thing it will do is prompt you for your MFA account or your MFA challenge. Perfect. You do the challenge. You do either thumbprint, the face recognition, whatever your challenge is, and then it goes on and it applies configuration. That's good. So let's say it's like 5 p.m. You're just eager to get back home, so you apply the configuration. You get in the car, and then 15 minutes later, the consistency kicks in. The consistency check. It needs you to answer the challenge again. So while you're driving, boom, you get your phone ringing saying you need to do that challenge again. And every 15 minutes and so on, right? So it's not practical. It doesn't make sense. What we're working on right now is to be able to do authentication with app identity. That is our main focus right now. This is something that we are dedicating a lot of resources to try to solve. It's coming. We don't have an ETA for it. In the meantime, the recommendation is just to use an account that is not MFA enabled to run the configuration and to do the consistency check. We fully understand that this is not ideal for a lot of clients, and as I said, we are actively working on this. So for a moment, MFA works for extraction. It doesn't when you apply it. We do have a partner, a company from Croatia named Cisco. So they are working right now on a graphical user interface tool that sits on top of Office 365 DSC. The tool is called Cisco Traits. So I strongly encourage you folks to take a look at it. They have an available beta right now. I think it's a 15 days trial you can get from their website. So great stuff. They are fully using Office 365 DSC under the cover, and they provide that eye candy. And to be honest, sometimes it's easier to use the visual graphical user interface that they created than just go in the PowerShell code and figure out exactly what the changes are. It tells you so you can take snapshots in time of your tenant, compare snapshots. You can take a snapshot of one tenant and compare that snapshot against another tenant. You can pretty much do everything there as well with Office 365 out of the box, but it's command line based, right? So I strongly encourage you folks to take a look at the tool there. Let's jump into the demos. And so the first demo I want to do is I am going to define a configuration here for Office 365 DSC. And that configuration here, forget about everything else, right? The only thing really I want you to focus on is the core of my configuration, right? Which is my DSC resources. In here, I'm defining one user named John Smith. I'm assigning him an E5 license, defining properties about the user. I'm creating, again, my Bob user. I'm going to be creating it in my Office 365 tenant this time around. I'm defining what the sharing settings for SharePoint Online should be. I'm creating one team. So I'm creating a team called Modern Workplace Community Sharing Day. And I am creating a channel policy that basically says, do not allow private team discovery, allow org-wide team creation, so anybody can go and create a team set to false, and allow private channel creation set to true, so people can create private channels. So this is my configuration. Now again, because I believe that we should not have any smoke and mirrors in demos, when I refresh this, you can see that right now I only have one team, which is a default Microsoft Teams. If that just comes back, there we go. So one team. If I take a look at the Teams policy, I should only have one, the default one, the global one. SharePoint admin, so the sharing settings. I'm just going to refresh this, but basically they're currently both set, both the SharePoint and OneDrive settings are set to be the most permissive. So the sliders are at the top currently, and I only have one user, which is my admin account. I'm going to go in, I'm going to run this configuration. The first thing it's going to ask me is, well, what credentials do you want to use? Now, in my case here, I'm using the global admin, just for demo purposes. If you want to run this on your tenant, you need an account that has access to all the workloads, so admin access to all the workloads defined in the file. In my case, Office 365 General Administration to create users, SharePoint Online to set the SPO sharing settings, and Teams to create the channel policy and the actual team. So in my case here, I'm just going to provide my admin account, and it's going to go in and create all the components. So it's creating the users right now. It's going to take a few seconds. So it's creating John Smith. So if I go back, wrong window. If I go back here and refresh this, I should see John being created any minute now. That's the one thing with me, I'm not really patient. So, come on, John. So John's there, Bob's on his way. And then we're going to see the rest being created, right? So what it's doing under the cover right now, so it's calling into the Azure AD module. So remember I was telling you that O365 just calls into the dependencies. It's creating my users. Then it's going to call into the PNP for SharePoint PowerShell module, change those sharing settings. You can see, so the sliders actually went down. The next thing it's doing is it's calling inside the Teams PowerShell module to create that community sharing day team, which is not done yet. It's doing it as we speak. And then the last one is the the channel policy. So it's going to use the Skype for Business API to actually create that under the cover. You don't need to know that. That's the beauty about the tool, right? You just write your configuration and you let it go. You don't need to understand how it works under the cover. So if I go back to Manage Teams, there we go. So my team has been created. And what about my policies? So I still only have one, so it's on its way. But you get the concept. Right? So building up on the demo we did previously where I was creating two users. So what's going on? Where is it? All right, it's almost there. There we go. So it should be there now. There we go. So my channel policy. Everything worked. The demo gods are with me today. Now, what I was saying was building on the previous example we did. What happens now if I go in and I switch this back up, let's say. Right? So just this one here. I'm going to go and save this. Now, just like the previous example, right, what I can do is I can actually go and do test DSC configuration and detailed. What it's doing is it's going to go and remotely do the consistency check. It would have happened anyway in 15 minutes. Again, I don't have the patience to wait for 15 minutes. But right now, it's remotely assessing my tenant to see if it's in that desired state or not. And it's going to come back saying, hopefully, should come back and say it's not, because my SPO sharing settings are not in the desired state. Again, it doesn't tell me much other than what resource group or resource block is not in the desired state. But because we have advanced logging with Office 365 DSC, you can go in Event Viewer. If you go under Applications and Services Log, as I mentioned, we do have an Office 365 DSC journal that's available that logs everything for that module, any activity for the Office 365 DSC module. So if you go in here, you can see that you do have your Office 365 DSC journal. You go in there, and I can see right from here that, yes, there's a drift for SPO sharing setting. And the reason why there's a drift is that the sharing capability setting should have been set to external user and guest sharing, but it was, or sorry, it's set to this here, but it was supposed to be set to existing external user sharing only. So it detected the drift and it told me exactly what the drift was. So you can keep full control over your configuration. The second demo I want to do for this module is how about assessing a tenant. In this case here, we deployed a configuration and then we tested to see if it was still in the desired state. But what if what we have is actually a template? Right? So at one point I was telling you, if we go back to our website, that template section here, we're going to be publishing predefined or vetted known good configuration here that you're going to be able to go and acquire and assess your environments against. That's the plan. It's coming shortly. We are still working on producing what the list of those templates should be, but it's something we're doing right now. And if you're interested in helping out, contributing to those templates, please reach out on Twitter as well. Now, so if I want to do this, let's take a look at this resource here, or this file. So assume that this is a Teams enablement configuration, right? So it's basically the minimal set of settings you should be deploying when you configure Teams. Now, don't take my word for granted. This is not a true basic configuration. It's just a demo, right? Okay, but the plan is to come up with those templates. Now, what we have here is we define one calling policy, one channel policy, one client configuration, and so on. Now, I know for a fact that my tenant is not configured using those best practices, but I want to figure out why. What is not in the desired state? So before we do this, I'm just going to clear my logs just so that we can actually keep track of the changes there. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to go and run a new PowerShell console. So you see this file here is called Teams Remote Work Enablement. What we're going to do is I'm actually going to go and call into a new commandlet called assert O365 DSC template. I'm going to pass in the path for my template. In my case here, it's going to be C community sharing days demo, and then Teams rapid work.ps1. So this is my template. So I'm running this here. So what it's going to do, right? It's going to prompt me for my credential, basically saying you have a template. It's not associated with any tenant whatsoever. It's a generic template. It's a known good configuration template that we have vetted and that we basically say, you feel free to use it and assess your tenant or apply it if you want. You can apply it as well. But in my case, I'm just doing an assessment and it's going to ask me what tenant do you want to assess. So I'm going to type in the credentials of my tenant I want to go and assess. And it's going to remotely assess the tenant. And it's going to come back with information about why that remote tenant doesn't match that known good configuration. Like what needs to be fixed on that tenant in order to match my best practices that I'm defining in my template. Should take a few seconds. We're just going to let it run real quick. But beauty about it is in this session here, it's going to come back and tell me exactly what components are not in the desired state. But because I have advanced logging as well with Office 365 DSC, I can just go in and figure out more details as to what issues have been encountered. So you see it came back with an error saying the environment does not match the template. The following components are not in the desired state. So the Teams client configuration, the guest messaging configuration, team meeting broadcast configuration, and meeting configuration. Now if I go back here and simply refresh this, you see I have information about each of those 4 resources that are not in the desired state and exactly what the issue is. So for example, for my Teams client configuration, allow guest users should be set to true, but it was set to false. And again, very powerful stuff.